Welcome back to another episode of the Done Deal Show. Ben Jacobs joins us live now. Lots happening in the window. A big tug of war between Man United and Arsenal being reported. £40 million bids apiece supposedly being made for the Argentinian centre-back from Ajax. We're, of course, going to delve into Raphinha to Chelsea. Their gate crash, their hijack yesterday afternoon sent social media into a frenzy. We're also going to take a look at De Jong, De Ligt, Raheem Sterling, Dembele, Lewandowski, and more for you on the show. Taking a look across Europe also. Make sure the like button has been smashed. Make sure you're subscribing. But without further ado, Ben, how are you?
I'm very well. Good afternoon and hello to everybody in the chat. I'm delighted so far that we've probably got 20 odd messages saying hi, and still the jumper I'm wearing has not been slated. So it might just be safe. Maybe it will go unnoticed for the next hour.
Well, they love you. Social media loves you. The Football Terrace loves you. So I think, irrespective of their opinion of your wonderful jumper, I think they're more. I think you'll be okay. I think you're safe, Ben. I really do. And it was an extraordinary 24 hours, really. The breakthroughs in the Man United deals with De Jong, the hijack for Tyrell. I even forget his name now. Malacia. And then the Raphinha news just kind of came out of nowhere for people. And nobody, it was almost this sort of this standing start. And I was like, wow, has this happened really? Because Arsenal felt they were in the lead and then it all changed. But yeah, a blistering 24 hours.
Yeah, and welcome to the transfer window. I mean, this is how deals work. And I think that the more you choose to consume your transfer window news through social media and in a minute by minute, hour by hour mentality, the more these twists are going to make you pull your hair out, especially in the case of Raphinha, if you're an Arsenal fan. But Chelsea's interest in Raphinha is not new or surprising. They tried to sign Raphinha under the old regime in the January window and the sanctions prevented it. And they've revisited Raphinha as a target. And Chelsea were always going to prioritise Raheem Sterling, which is becoming increasingly likely. The clubs are close to a deal there now on financial terms. And then one other, and that was either going to be a Dembele, a Raphinha, a Richarlison, or who knows, another surprise name if they didn't get one of those three targets. So Chelsea's interest in itself is not surprising, but what caught some by surprise was the fact that Arsenal thought they were in control of that particular transfer. They were in regular conversation with Leeds United. They felt that it was going to be a straight choice between Barcelona and Arsenal. And not only did Arsenal feel like they could pitch the club and the mentality and the Arteta way and the arrival of Gabriel Jesus and probably still a few others in this window, but they also had a sense that Barcelona couldn't afford the transfer. Then, of course, Chelsea come along and they can afford the transfer, and they got a deal agreed pretty quickly with Leeds United financially. And I think the situation now, and it's worth reiterating, is this is not yet a done deal. The personal terms with Raphinha are more than just a formality, not because he's not interested in Chelsea, not because there's any undue complications, but the player hasn't decided. And the reason for that is, again, to reiterate, not because he doesn't want to join Chelsea, but it's happened very fast. And there's two ways of doing a transfer. Number one is where you agree a fee first with the club, then go to the player. Manchester United and De Jong is happening that way. And the other way is where you go to the player first, and then you try and get a price with the football club. And Jules Koundé is a good example of that, where Chelsea have had a 5-year agreement with him for quite some time, but they've still not found a price with Sevilla. When it happens in a way where a club moves fast and they agree a deal quickly with the selling club, the player may have to take some time to think. They may be unaware of what the terms are at that point. They're reliant on their agent. So there are still some conversations to be had. And I said this morning on social media, it's jumping the gun as far as Chelsea fans are concerned to say personal terms have been agreed or simply will be agreed. Because from Arsenal's point of view in that transfer, they haven't entirely given up. So when Chelsea and Raphinha speak, Arsenal still could potentially try and alter the situation. As of 8 p.m. last night, Edu was effectively floundering, waiting to work out what was going on, what Arsenal might have to bid to get an agreement with Leeds United, having discovered that his second offer for the player had been rejected. Now, if you go from 8 p.m. one night to this morning and now 4 p.m. in the afternoon, Arsenal's perspective on Raphinha hasn't changed. So they're either going to give up because they don't want to meet the financial valuation, or they're going to come back in with another bid, or from Chelsea's perspective, they're going to have no opportunity to do that because Arsenal are going to get wind of the fact that Raphinha, now there's Chelsea interest, is no longer interested in an Arsenal move. And none of that at this point has been communicated to Arsenal. So they haven't made another bid. They haven't countered Chelsea's bid yet. They haven't given up either. They are waiting to see how the next 24 to 48 hours plays out. And Deco will intimate in all likelihood to Edu whether or not Raphinha is still open to talking to Arsenal so he can make a decision between those two clubs, or whether it's simply a done deal with Chelsea. From Barcelona's perspective, at the moment, they can't afford the transfer. So I would say, financially speaking, they're out the race. And from Chelsea's point of view, sources there do think that that is a highly likely deal. So fans want to hear the short answer. And you'll know, if you've heard me on this show, that I rarely give a short answer. But it's irresponsible journalism to just tell you it's a done deal at Chelsea. It is very likely it's a done deal at Chelsea. If fans want to guess it's already a done deal, they've probably got a 90% chance of being right. But as we stand at the moment, Arsenal have not 100% given up, and Chelsea are not 100% over the line. They have an agreement with Leeds United, and they remain in talks for personal terms, normal talks, negotiations. There's no undue hurdles. There's no red flags at the moment. It will be a 5-year deal if they succeed, but it's going to take probably 24 to 48 hours, even still moving fast, for Chelsea to be in a position where this is officially a done deal, as opposed to a highly, highly likely deal where there are still other suitors circling.
Yeah, do you know what I think's really interesting about it is sometimes football fans have got to just think about the human. And from Raphinha's point of view, it felt like, and I'm just kind of surmising here from the multiple reports from multiple countries, it was almost Arsenal Barca was where he wanted to go initially, but they just didn't look like they were going to bid. So he's had to rethink. Arsenal put all the time, the energy and effort in. So it's almost, he's probably convinced himself, okay, Arsenal's a good place for me. Then Chelsea make the move. They've offered him a good deal. I've read today, 6 million a year, £115,000 a week. I mean, give or take. And he's probably happy with the terms from Chelsea, but it's almost, can I just have a little bit of time to sit back and think about what I actually want to do? Because the last thing Chelsea want as well is a player saying yes, and then in a week's time going, I wish I didn't do that. Actually, I would have preferred Arsenal, or even staying at Leeds for one more year. I don't know. Maybe Barca come back in for me in January or next year. So I think it's quite a sensible thing. I think most Chelsea fans are quite confident, especially if Arsenal sort of slightly stepping back. But I did see your tweet last night that I kind of retweeted, and it's interesting, as you say, that news when it's popular, everyone loves you. And a few Chelsea fans kind of responded saying, "Nah, Fabrizio and everybody said it's done." I went, read what Ben said again. Arsenal haven't 100% walked away from this deal. And I suppose the question is to Arsenal fans, do you think that you'll be able to come back and fight back for this? I mean, it will be a very interesting debate. Fans themselves have been on socials for the past 2 weeks. Who's got the biggest pull? A lot of gooners felt they could pull this off without Champions League. Look, as a football fan, I'm enjoying watching it. I'm not going to lie, Ben. It's absolutely exciting. I think what's also important, what you said at the beginning, around Chelsea wanting two attackers. And I know Arsenal fans and rivals of Chelsea won't necessarily read multiple Chelsea articles, but I was kind of shocked to see rivals say, well, that means Sterling's not going to happen with Raphinha. I'm like, I swear every article I've read about Chelsea wanting attackers said two. In terms of Dembele, there were reports yesterday that a lot of us shared via aggregating, quoting sources abroad, that Chelsea made a new offer. Is there any truth to that at all?
No truth whatsoever. Chelsea are interested in Dembele, but as I've pretty consistently reported over the last 10 days or so, nothing has really changed, as I understand it anyway. Chelsea are waiting to see how the situation plays out as regards the final 48 hours of Dembele's contract, knowing that he's in deep talks with the football club. And Barcelona sources close to the club have intimated for days, as you would expect, that he will sign the deal on the table. From Dembele's perspective, Sissoko is implying that a little bit more will need to be done, and Barcelona may cave and change the offer on the table slightly to make it more lucrative. And when you actually just think about it in financial terms, Dembele is taking a pay cut having finished the season on fire. So you can certainly understand why he would want better terms, but better terms should not be confused with greedy terms. And that's been the problem all along with Dembele and Barcelona, that he's not asking for a little bit more to put him back at market value. He's asking for a substantial pay increase at a point where Barcelona need him to take a decrease. And that's why the club and Dembele and Sissoko are so far apart. Chelsea have always had an interest in Dembele. We know that. Thomas Tuchel said it directly to Todd Boehly pretty much in week 1. But their priority is Raheem Sterling, plus one other. So assuming Raphinha goes to Chelsea, which is the most likely scenario at the time of currently talking to you, there is no way whatsoever that Chelsea Football Club will sign Sterling plus Raphinha plus Dembele, even if he becomes a free agent. That is my understanding, partly because Dembele, even on a free, has such high wages, but also because Chelsea have still only got a finite amount of money to throw around, and it's quite a healthy transfer kitty, inclusive of things like fees, wages, agent money, and so on. But it's still only going to take you, and I say only, but this is where we are in modern football, to let's say 200 million. And if Chelsea bring in Dembele, Raphinha, and Sterling, they still might have to go into the market and find a goalkeeper. They've definitely got to get 2 centre-backs. They might have to find a right-back, and they may also wish to get a central midfielder, depending on what goes on with Jorginho or Kante. And there's no way of doing that maths within 200 million for the kind of targets that Chelsea Football Club want and need to close the gap between themselves and Liverpool and Manchester City. So if Dembele leaves Barcelona, he'll do so on a free, not having signed a contract with anybody. Bayern Munich, not interested. They haven't been for weeks. PSG, they were interested around about 2 months ago, and actually their interest in Dembele dates back further, right to the point when the contract renewal was placed on the table in December last year. But under Campos and Gaultier, he is not on their radar. Again, absolutely no offer. And Chelsea have not tabled any form of formal offer at this point either. So Dembele really only has 2 options. He either has to sign what's in front of him or obviously negotiate it to a slightly better deal. And I think that's why Barcelona remains so confident. And he has to make a decision very, very fast now, today or tomorrow, or he has to leave the club on a free transfer, at which point he goes out into the market and has much less leverage to try and negotiate the deal he wants because he's without a football club. I don't think at this point Chelsea will come in for Dembele. If you'd have asked me 2 or 3 weeks ago, perhaps, because they were certainly exploring it. But they heard his wage demands, and since then, there's really been no movement. If he joins Chelsea, he'll jump to somewhere in the region of, if not entirely, the highest earner at the football club. So the lowest value that Dembele would want and Chelsea would pay might be around the 200,000 mark, and the highest that Dembele would want at Chelsea would be closer to the 350,000 mark. And the compromise could put him in the high 270s, which would put him up there with Kante as one of the highest earners. But that's not how Chelsea have played this. They've not started that high. So these talks would not only have to be far more advanced and developed, but Chelsea would actually have to decide that Dembele is the attacking priority. And right now he's behind Raphinha and behind Sterling. And that's what makes it more likely as well that he'll sign at Barcelona. All of these offers, Chelsea's so-called formal offer, Liverpool's apparent interest, is all coming from Sissoko to leverage shock horror right at the point when Dembele is in deep talks with Barcelona to try and get more. Liverpool laughed off the links, and they actually said that they warned Sissoko not to start spreading false rumours about their interest. They were not interested in Dembele And they made that very clear that they were unhappy with any form of links being put out there. So Liverpool are not even in the race. Bayern are not even in the race. PSG were only in the race historically. And Chelsea are the genuine interest. But now they've got two other attacking targets that they're far, far more advanced with. And that is why, only my personal opinion, I think it is highly, highly likely that Dembele will stay at Barcelona, because in that negotiation, they've got all of the cards. And then if Barcelona also don't think they're going to get Raphinha, they've got even more reason to want to keep on to Dembele.
And Ben, as Prime there said in the comments, Ben applying context, which is great. You learn a lot from Ben. You make sure you listen to him, people. I think what's interesting for me is you mentioned Raphinha there. I think Arsenal and the Premier League clubs almost elevating the price. I mean, yes, Leeds wants 65 million, but that number only really came about once the Prem clubs got involved. When it was Barcelona by themselves, I would read 35, 40 millions. But Raphinha looking like he might stay in the Prem because the sale price has gone up. It puts Barcelona into such a commanding position with Dembele, because if that makes sense, because he ain't really got very many other options. No one that's going to pay him what Barca are willing to pay him. They also need someone in that position. I hear you completely. And the agents have been doing that a lot, because there was Milinkovic-Savic has been linked to Chelsea, and someone that I know that works for Chelsea Football Club said to me, pure agent talk. There's been nothing really between the clubs. I'm sure you've heard pretty much the same thing from Chelsea around Milinkovic-Savic as well. A few agents seem to be doing this at the minute, where they're kind of pushing these stories, and it's not really coming from the clubs at all.
I mean, look, this isn't new. This is what agents do. And the way that you consume the transfer window is either by taking on board a part of the puzzle or trying to portray the whole puzzle. And if you portray a part of the puzzle, you have to follow blow by blow, day by day. And there's a lot of good journalists out there that do that. But situations will change very quickly. So I always try and report on a bit less. And some will say that I give too much context or I waffle. I've already seen that in the chat, but I'm glad to see that some people like the jumper, and it's from Zara, by the way, at $49.99, which is an insane price for a jumper. It's like a Premier League inflated price of jumpers. But if you want to get that, it is available in Zara. But I think here's the thing. When an agent tells you one thing, as a journalist, before you publish, you've got two options. One is that you publish it because it's been given to you, and who knows, it might even be on record and you're fully entitled to do that. Or two is you take what the agent said to the buyer, to the seller, to the director of football, to the player, to the owner, and so on. And then in getting that series of responses, you get the full picture. And if you find there are contradictory narratives, then you can report that. And if you find there is continuity in narrative, then you become a lot more sure, because you've ran from different perspectives the same eventuality by all these different people. And if the buyer and the seller and the director of football and the player and the agent all agree, you start to think, okay, it's heading in one clear direction. But when somebody at Liverpool, senior and directly responsible for recruitment, shouts down Dembele, and you trust them and you have a history, and this is the thing as journalists, it's about your relationships. So then over time, there's 7 or 8 directors of football now, at least, that I've done 7 or 8 windows with. And I know, therefore, historically, during those windows, they haven't fed me a false story. There's 7 or 8 agents, some top agents I know, have fed me a false story. So you have to be very careful as a journalist. There's nothing wrong with just giving one side of the story, but you have to then be very clear as someone consuming that as a fan, that it may change, it may be contradicted, because the transfer window is not just a negotiation, it's a game as well.
Of course, and I think that's something I saw the other day. I mean, I posted like a thread saying what I believe, and in all the different reports. And it was about maybe 10 replies where they said, you're just covering all bases, so you're not wrong. I'm like, no, I'm trying to give you the full picture of the story. Like, it's all, but that's what must be hard for some journalists, because you get some groups of football fans that just want to hear that one side, like the response from the Chelsea fan yesterday to your tweet that on my thread, where I kind of shared it in the thread of what all the journalists were saying, of no, other journalists have said that Arsenal were out the race. It's like, but this is the full story. What, for me, I like hearing all the sides, and then it enables you to make a better assumption, really, as a fan of what's going on. So I totally agree. Staying with Chelsea, we know that Ligt is a big part of the plans. There's talk today of Koulibaly holding talks with Chelsea Football Club. Nathan Ake, the sort of centre-back merry-go-round kind of continues at Chelsea. What's the latest on Ligt and the centre-back situation at Stamford Bridge?
Well, Chelsea need 2, if not 3 defenders, and quickly, certainly 2 centre-backs. And then if Azpilicueta ends up leaving, which is highly likely as well, you hit a scenario where a right-back is necessary as well, which is why Klaus has come into the equation. With Ligt, Chelsea have kind of accepted now, I think, that the price in a straight cash deal is too high. So although you could term Ligt the priority centre-back, and at 22 years of age, there's value there as well, this will be a test for Todd Boehly with his direct, proactive style of recruitment, where he's going to have to bring that sort of baseball mentality and get a swap deal done. And he's fortunate in the sense that Juventus have looked at Jorginho in a straight deal for somewhere around 50 million euros. That would be their kind of rough starting point. And it's quite clear over the last few weeks that Chelsea would be prepared to consider other players in a swap deal for Ligt, particularly Timo Werner. I actually don't think, from what I've heard, even though he is open to a move to Serie A, that Chelsea want to involve Christian Pulisic in this particular deal. But the challenge remains that Juventus are talking around the 100 million euro mark. And as I said before, Chelsea have got to find 2 centre-backs, maybe a right-back, possibly a midfielder, and 2 attackers. And that is partially down to the high volume of outgoings. So it's not just a case of being ambitious and bringing in all these names. The 4 or 5, certainly 4, but you could argue 5, it's a necessity for Chelsea to get that volume of players in. And however hard I try and do the maths, and it would be the same with Declan Rice, by the way, as well, without a swap deal, I can't see how you bring in 5 for 200 million, not without a substantial outgoing. And they might get it for, let's say, a Hakim Ziyech, but by the same token, Milan are chasing him, and that could only be a loan deal. So Chelsea have to be careful here that they prioritize, and they already have done that in respect of, let's say, Sterling and now Raphinha. And again, to reiterate with Raphinha, Barcelona financially are currently out the race, but a De Jong sale or some movement could change aspects of that. And we know that his preference, if all 3 offers were on the table, would probably be to pick Barcelona. But at the moment, at the time of speaking, they cannot table an offer that Leeds will accept. So Chelsea, therefore, are the favourites, and they are relying on the fact that they'll agree terms quickly to stop any move from Barcelona. Now, if they get Raphinha, that is 60 odd million. If they get Sterling, that will be something in the region of 45 to 50 million. That's 110 of your 200 million. Jules Koundé is the other defender. That deal is not dead. I know there's other reports out there that have said that Chelsea have given up, that Sevilla and the players' agents have got frustrated. But you might remember, I think, on my debut show for the Jules Koundé deal, I said to you at the time, Chelsea might have to pay the release clause or somewhere very, very close to it. And I think most people responded and said, no, it's going to be 10 or 15 million less. But actually, Sevilla have played hard ball. A compromise, I think, can be reached on the fee there. But Chelsea would still then have total spending from the 3 players, a Koundé deal, a Raphinha deal, a Sterling deal, for roughly speaking 150 million, and still have to find at least one other defender. So then when you start talking about Ligt, he's not within your 200 million. To add him as a second defender, you'd need 250 million. And this is why Chelsea are exploring all kinds of different options. So I think fans are getting frustrated because they're hearing names on the shortlist every single day. Obviously, Nathan Ake as well is another one, a very realistic target too. So it might be a double swoop from Manchester City. But the reason why you're hearing all these names is because as Chelsea realise who is a realistic priority that they can advance to get to an agreement and ultimately a player signature, they're knocking off that amount from their budget. And then suddenly when they then go into the market in a position where they maybe had previously allocated 60, 70, 80 million, if they think another deal is going to happen, there might only be 40 million left. And this is the position Manchester United are in, where they've got roughly 100 million to spend. If you want De Jong, what's left to go out in the market and get an Anthony or another player at 50, 60, 70 million, unless you sell somebody or somehow the board within financial fair play give you more budget. So that's the balancing act. And that's partially why, even at 200 million in Chelsea's case, which I think would be the maximum they'll spend this window, you're constantly hearing so many names mentioned, because once that one target is ticked off, you have to kind of realign and work out who's within your budget, not just who's within your shortlist.
Absolutely. And I think I just want to bring it back to the Raphinha thing. Gerard Romero from who's obviously a Barca-based sort of transfer journalist. I know he's a journalist, as he was on Twitch a lot. Very credible in the Barca fan base. He said that Barcelona are still alive in the Raphinha race. The clubs have a high chance of signing the player, although Chelsea have an agreement with Leeds due to the strength of Deco and the player. And I think that just alludes to exactly what it is that you said, like, this could still go. And most people don't think Barcelona are going to reach this kind of 60, 65 million pounds that Chelsea are willing to offer. But the press coming out of Barca are saying it could still happen. And that's the fluidity of the transfer. Who knows where Barca have pulled this money from? Someone's found it down the back of a sofa. Maybe another player's leaving. It's going to be an interesting one indeed. But I think Chelsea fans, as you said there about the number of links, I don't think fans should be shocked when there are lots of links, as you say, because it isn't this case of we're going to look at 2 or 3 players and that's it only. There's multiple options for you. And it's going to be intriguing to see kind of what comes off, who comes in, who falls away in relation to Chelsea. Because I don't know, they're going to spend a hell of a lot of money.
Barcelona, as I said yesterday, the player has not decided his next club. And therefore, Chelsea become front runners, and if you talk to Chelsea sources, they feel this is a likely deal. And the reason for that is because they believe they're ahead of Arsenal, even if they come in with a bid that's accepted. They've obviously got Champions League football. And in addition to that, they, much like Barcelona, have got a strong relationship with Deco, a former player. But Todd Boehly is moving fast in the market to blow away any other interest. And effectively, he's giving Raphinha a choice. Sign this deal, which is higher package-wise, as I understand it, than Barcelona will be able to offer. Sign it fast, resolve your future, and come to Chelsea and play Champions League football. Or wait and see whether another credible offer is agreed. And it's all very well saying that Raphinha will go to Barcelona. And we know, as I've already said many times, if Barcelona agree a deal with Leeds and the package offered to Raphinha is acceptable on personal terms, so I'm purely speaking hypothetically, if Barcelona and Chelsea had the same deal with the Leeds and were able to offer the same salaries and package, Raphinha would pick Barcelona over Chelsea. But that is purely hypothetical. And Barcelona at the moment have a desire to sign Raphinha. Raphinha has a dream of playing for Barcelona, but they are still miles away from agreeing any kind of package with Leeds, and the Chelsea offer might make Raphinha rethink if something comes from Barcelona that is formal and tangible, because their offer, as we're finding with Dembele, due to their financial situation, will be lower. So I think that the clue is going to be again in the next 48 hours. And I've said all along, even though some Chelsea fans didn't like it, it's not a done deal at Chelsea. It is a likely deal at Chelsea. But the next 48 hours are going to tell you everything. And the reason for that is because Chelsea will either wrap up personal terms fast and then get their player, or Raphinha and his camp will delay, hoping that Barcelona find almost miracle finances from somewhere. And then there are 2 offers on the table. The problem from Arsenal's perspective is that it's bad news either way, because there's no way he's going to Arsenal.
Yeah.
If Chelsea get the deal done, then Arsenal's efforts are in vain. So Arsenal actually have to hope that the Barcelona interest proves to be financially impossible. The interest is credible, make no mistake about that. But is it financially possible? And if it isn't, then Arsenal could still come back and try and go head-to-head with Chelsea. So this, again, is a great example of the transfer window. And it's why, as journalists, we take a step back and we give fans our opinion. I've said many times, I think the most likely scenario still is Raphinha ends up at Chelsea now. But the reason why we take a step back and say it's an open race. And the first line I wrote yesterday, even though others were perhaps saying it was a done deal, I said the player hasn't decided. And the reason for that is because that's my understanding. And I don't want to sound like I'm sitting on the fence, but if you want a daily update on the transfer window, I'm giving you the daily update, which is it is not a done deal to Chelsea. It's heading in that direction. If Barcelona now come in and alter that, it's going to be very, very interesting.
Well, this is the thing, you'll know, and I've probably spoken to many credible journalists. Fabrizio gets accused of this all the time. You say things in a way that mean you can get out of it later. So, no, he's just telling you that, like, and journalists are very careful now with putting words like as of now, things are subject to change, because social media has this habit of going, right, we're going to come after you, we're going to go at you. As an example, when Ornstein said the other day that he thinks Eriksen will end up at United, before he even said it, I could get this wrong, just because he knows if it doesn't happen, there will be hundreds of thousands of Man United fans coming at him. And these things change, as you say. I think everything you've said makes a lot of sense around this. I think that Chelsea have offered terms that are acceptable to Raphinha. Of course they would be. It'll be a big pay rise from what he's on, a great squad status, playing time, Champions League football, Thomas Tuchel. But there is still that, I already agreed with Barca. Maybe let's just see what they offer, and maybe Arsenal come back in. And it's going to be an exciting next few days in relation to this deal. It very, very much is. I think your question there, Killer, was answered without having to ask it directly to Ben. Ben is tier 1. Terry is biased, cannot be. I'm not tier anything. I'm not a journalist. I never claimed to be, my brother. Like, I am just a football fan who puts out what I hear and read, and I'm very, very comfortable with that. People are a little bit silly sometimes. You are right. Another big deal. Viewers, by the way, make sure the like button's being smashed. Nearly 4,000 people tuning in to watch us live, so thank you very much. Hit the like button, subscribe to the Terrace as well. Another big deal that's I'm not saying it's a mess. It's amazing. I love it. I'm not going to lie. Man United are reportedly today about to or will offer or preparing a bid. It's been written in 3 different ways, for a £40 million offer for Lisandro Martinez. Most of the credible reports before this have suggested Arsenal are leading this race. There's now reports coming out of the Netherlands that they're going to make a third and improved bid again. What's the latest as far as you understand surrounding the future of Lorenzo Martinez from Ajax?
Well, I think that with Lisandro Martinez, Manchester United are not anywhere near as advanced as Arsenal, not just because Arsenal are preparing a third bid, and I do understand that to be true, but there's actually no credible evidence from Manchester United sources that they are all in the race for Martinez. And if they sign Malacia, I'm not sure that Martinez will be somebody, should De Jong come in, that they can either afford or that they will try and hijack. And Arsenal fans are obviously going to be a little bit nervous, because even though they've done a great bit of business in Gabriel Jesus, and let's not forget they fought off rivals, including Tottenham, who had Champions League football to offer him. But there will be a feeling, if they lose out on Raphinha and then they lose out on Martinez, of what is Edu doing, and is there a hesitancy in the approach? And by the time you get to third bids, it can be for 2 reasons. One, because the selling club are playing hardball, and I do think this is the case with Ajax. And 2, potentially because the club trying to buy are trying to squeeze every penny, and they're over negotiating, and that sluggishness allows other suitors to come in. And at the moment, there's still no indication that Arsenal are going to get hijacked by Manchester United. If anything, I think United would prefer somebody like Pau Torres as opposed to Lisandro Martinez. And of course, it's normal and natural when a player from Ajax under a manager like Ten Hag is linked, that everybody at Manchester United gets really excited. But my understanding on this deal is that Arsenal are still very much the front runners. I think they're going to have to actually end up paying in excess of 40 million, probably somewhere more like mid 40s, and add-ons on top of that as well. So this will not be a cheap deal, but Arsenal sources talking to them, albeit 48 hours ago, I didn't get an update in the last 24 hours because I got drowned in Raphinha news. But the last update that I got from Arsenal was that they're working on it. they're confident, they're hoping to table another offer, and that they believe that they will reach an agreement to at least get that deal to the point of them being able to talk to the player. Manchester United will be aware of that, but it still remains to be seen whether they are actually going to table anything formal. And again, I come back to what I said before. Even though Manchester United need defenders, if they have 100 million to spend and 2/3 of that comes out in De Jong, then they almost have no ability to afford a player like Martinez unless the financials are increased or we get outgoings. And that's what's really interesting about Manchester United. The outgoings, where's the money, significant cash going to come from? Because you're not going to find it with a Pereira or an Eric Bailly, and Anthony Martial could actually have a role to play with Ten Hag. And if he can be rejuvenated, and he certainly looked pretty happy to be back in pre-season training, that's an option. But even if you sell him, I don't think there's a queue of suitors. So where do Manchester United pull in potentially 40 to 70 million more that can be reinvested into transfers to spend above the 100 million they're allocated? So I think that there has to be a compromise. If you want De Jong, I just don't see how Manchester United can bring in Martinez, because they already exceed their supposed spending. And nobody at Manchester United, by the way, denies that it's going to be tight this summer. Nobody at Manchester United is countering the claim that they've got 100 to 115 million to spend. So like I say, if De Jong comes, I think that almost by default takes Martinez off the table.
I think you're missing one issue though, Ben, to be honest. I'm surprised you've missed it. We've got a brilliant asset to sell. Phil Jones is available, all right? And you can definitely can raise some big money through selling Phil Jones there. Do you know what? Like, I hear where you're coming from. I think for me, I'm kind of happy to hear we're saying there's only £100 million to spend. Personally, just a feeling, no sources. I think we've got more than that. Man United, I think, are playing this game of almost the opposite of what Woodward did. Ed Woodward will be sitting there giving it, we've got 250 million to spend. We're richer than everybody else. Watch what we do. And then everybody whacks an extra 20 million pounds on every player we're looking for. My hope is that we've got a little bit more money than we're telling everybody that we've got, to try and put out into the market that we're not there or thereabouts. The Lisandro Martinez deal was interesting because, again, I do trust you, that you're a brilliant guy, you know what you're talking about. I'm hopeful that we can get a deal done here, but I will listen to you because I know you're a hell of a lot more informed than I am. And I think that'd be some disappointing news for Man United fans. But focusing on Arsenal, I think Arsenal fans, I think what you've alluded to is very important. Arsenal fans, if they were to lose out on this player, that would be two in the bounce, especially as they called their interest in Youri Tielemans, because we all know that deal's still active and they can go back to it later on. Seemingly nobody else has come. I saw some loose reports, but it was from the Metro, and I don't mean to be rude. I don't know who works for the Metro. They're normally an aggregator, really. Said that United are looking at him. I don't think there's any truth to that whatsoever. If they do call their interest there and they go elsewhere and they don't land him, it's more so the kind of, for fans, it's more the embarrassment of it, I suppose. You've given up a bird in the hand to chase two in the bush, and you didn't get either of them. And do you feel like missing out on Raphinha will make Arsenal push a little bit harder and faster to make sure they secure Lisandro, just so they can say, we did it, we got it done? It's sort of a good notch on the bedpost, as it were.
I don't think so, because people are forgetting at this point how early we are in the window. And I always say that you can judge your team daily based on targets and headlines, but fundamentally you want to look at your squad at the beginning of a window, and then you want to judge them on day one and see who's new that arrives for the first day of pre-season training. And from Arsenal's point of view, Gabriel Jesus and Marquinhos obviously fall into that category. Then judge again after a few pre-season games, then judge again when a ball is kicked, and then judge again at the close of the window. And then you can start determining what Edu's rating out of 10 and Arteta's is based on this window. But for some reason, I think it's just because Haaland's come in, Nunez has come in, Tchouaméni has gone as well, Raphinha is out there in the market, Jesus has moved, Sterling is very likely to move, and so on. And there's other big names still being talked about for huge fees. And I remember Jurgen Klopp a few seasons ago saying that he'll just quit if he ever signs a £100 million player. And obviously isn't too far off that. So the market's in overdrive. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic is part of that. And as I've said before in previous shows, the World Cup being in winter is an influencing factor as well, because players want stability heading into a World Cup, whereas usually they play a World Cup and delay making their decision in that summer World Cup. And then sometimes you get a bit of movement, but one or two will just remain, play a World Cup, return to their clubs, decide their future maybe in January or the following summer. It's the other way around this time. But everyone seems to be treating this window, due to all of that movement that I've alluded to, a little bit like it's the last day or week. And there's this mad scramble. Bowley's trying to get deals done in 48 hours. Manchester United are reportedly hijacking this deal for Martinez. Barcelona are desperately negotiating with Dembele with just hours left in his contract. Raphinha is thinking about one club, but then maybe joining Barcelona suddenly. Again, only according to reports. I've made my position on that clear. But this is not the end of the window. So Arsenal are not going to respond to one target being missed by suddenly making a late swoop, because they've got so much time left in the window that they will stick to a structured approach, and they'll live or die by that. And they will be judged at the end of the window and the end of the season, as opposed to a knee-jerk reaction of missing out, let's say, on Raphinha and being like, yikes, we better sign somebody. Because any club now saying we better sign somebody either hasn't planned their window properly or is needlessly panicking because there are months left of this transfer window. And I think due to the high volume of movement, we're forgetting that at the moment.
I couldn't agree with you more. And of course, as fans, we will all banter each other every now and then. But when you have a serious conversation, what I've seen in the past 3 weeks is Spurs fans get giddy with, by the way, breaking news, Bissouma has just been formally completely cleared of all the allegations against him, so he will face no further charges. That was a dot on the cards to happen. I read actually about that the other day, that he has no bowel conditions. And I'm like, I've got friends who had fights in pubs, right, when I was younger, and their bowel conditions were as long as your arm. The fact he was out on those types of charges with no bowel conditions, I was like, I think he's getting off. Just through experience of, not personal experience, just friends' experience of living on a council estate. You get a lot of people that go to court. But yeah, Bissouma's been cleared. But Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs fans were happy. And you had Arsenal and Man United fans really frustrated. And then we spoke 2 weeks ago. Chelsea fans then got frustrated. Why haven't we done anything yet? Then Man United fans. And then you have a couple of days where United look really close to bringing in De Jong and Tyrell, and Chelsea hijack a deal yesterday, and it switched. And I saw Arsenal fans last night panicking and ranting on YouTube. And I'm like, it's the 29th of June. I know the league starts in 5 weeks, but there's a long time left. Don't panic. I think all clubs are going to have pretty good summers. If I'm being honest, I really do. On Manchester United, Frenkie De Jong. There's a variety of reports. The Manchester Evening News saying the deals have been agreed. There are some saying the base fee's been agreed, but there's some details around the add-ons to look at. What's your understanding with Frenkie De Jong and Man United's kind of pursuit of Christian Eriksen, those two midfielders that might be coming into the club?
Well, Manchester United's best chance of signing Frenkie De Jong is Barcelona. That's the first thing to say. And by that, I mean that the club have to make it clear to De Jong that they want him out. Not necessarily because he's surplus to requirements, but they desperately need the money. Otherwise, Raphinha or a Lewandowski or potentially a Jules Koundé is simply not going to be able to come in. So Barca need this income to then start their incomings for the summer. And the agreement has obviously dragged on and taken some time. And as I understand it, there is now a base fee, guaranteed income of somewhere in the region of 65 million, but the add-ons are still being discussed. And Barcelona have been very clear that the total deal must be in excess of 80 million euros, if not potentially pushing closer to 85 million euros. And I think Manchester United are happy with that, but it's the finesse of what those add-ons entail. So Barcelona will want to make some of those add-ons, for example, performance-based in terms of number of appearances, because it's then highly likely that you get guaranteed income. Manchester United would prefer to make the vast majority of the add-ons team-related, knowing if they qualify for the Champions League, they will pay more, but they'll also be getting more by qualifying for the Champions League. So it becomes sort of win-win. And this is just the finesse of negotiation. So I don't actually think, even though nothing is official at this point, there'll be any problem between Barcelona and Manchester United agreeing a fee. The challenge is as I said before, two ways of doing a deal. This way of doing a deal is fee, then player, as opposed to agreeing with the player first, then going to the club. And Manchester United haven't yet held any significant negotiations regarding financials with De Jong. And personal terms are not a given. And I think in the very first show I did with you, I said, I genuinely believe De Jong when he says Barcelona is his dream club and he'd like to stay. And that's why Barcelona need to make it abundantly clear to De Jong that they want him to leave. And then his own personal preference to stay, to some extent, goes out of the window, because I don't think he's the kind of character that would stick around at the Camp Nou knowing he's not wanted. But if it's intimated by Xavi, for example, to De Jong, that he still has an integral part to play at the football club, you still might find the big twist in all of this is United do the legwork and then De Jong turns down the deal. Because I think a bit like Raphinha, where if every offer was on the table, he probably would pick Barcelona, but that may just not be an eventuality. With De Jong, if Barcelona and Manchester United made equivalent offers and said, we both want you, and this is redundant in the sense it's not the situation, but just to make my point, De Jong would pick Barcelona. He doesn't want to leave Barcelona for Manchester United, but he understands that the club want to sell him. So I think that this deal hinges upon Barcelona making it clear that De Jong must go, not could go, but must go. And if they tell the player it's his decision, and if he stays, they would utilize him, keep him, and he would be integral, and they don't need the money for whatever reason, then I think De Jong has got a really difficult decision to make, and it wouldn't remotely surprise me if he rejects Manchester United. So the more likely scenario is just that Barca and Man U are negotiating in such a detailed sense, and it's dragging out to the point where it probably does appear clear that Barcelona want De Jong to go. Reluctantly, but they need the money. So I think that makes the move to Manchester United edging close and more likely. But fundamentally, Manchester United have not yet 100% convinced, as I understand it anyway, De Jong to move. So it probably will happen, and it may still take a few weeks. But once again, Manchester United do not have any kind of personal terms agreement with De Jong to date.
James here says you don't get the chance to see this on the mainstream. Thank you, Terry and Ben. Again, you are getting called a Liverpool fan by a lot of our viewers that disagree with you profusely. But this is the thing, viewers. Let me just say to the viewers, right? I listen to Ben. I take what Ben says seriously. Of course, a lot of you are quoting other journalists who said other things. Everyone has different sources. This is what Ben has got to say, and we respect it. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. That's the point of these shows. Like, you won't always hear what you want to hear. It's not the way it works, because Ben wouldn't be being true to himself. But
by the way, a Liverpool fan, just go and read my bio. I'm a Leicester fan.
Yeah, I know. We actually just had a super chat. We had a super chat come through, actually, that said, any Leicester transfer news, Ben? Who's linked? Who's linked to Leicester?
Do you know what? Leicester have been really slow in the market, and it's about protecting current players, particularly James Maddison and Wesley Fofana. So the big bit of Leicester news that I've had over the last few days is that not only does Brendan Rodgers want to keep Wesley Fofana this summer, but the player's quite happy to stay at Leicester. Leicester won't even entertain an offer for Wesley Fofana if it's under 70 million. And that is at the lowest end. And we know from Leicester's transfer business that they play hard ball. They didn't let Riyad Mahrez leave for Chelsea. He waited, eventually got the Man City move. Leicester got good money. Leicester somehow got 80 million for Harry Maguire. So Fofana is not going to go cheap, but is not actually going to at all go in this window, full stop. And it was interesting because I wrote that and I got a lot of kind of feedback, I suppose, from fans of clubs that would like to sign him, saying that Leicester are going to sell. And then Fofana came along and liked the tweets, which is usually an indication that the player himself agrees with what's been said. So I'm not saying that is a confirmation categorically that he'll remain at Leicester, but whenever a player likes something about them, it usually suggests that there is some truth in that. And Leicester and Fofana's agents have been clear all along that he's perfectly settled at Leicester. So it's about protecting Maddison and Fofana for Leicester. And then in terms of transfer priorities, there is a possibility, if Tielemans isn't resolved, that they will be able to force him almost into some kind of extension. And that will make things interesting, because then the following summer, there will be a scenario where the transfer fee is higher. And if clubs get wind of that, that might provoke more interest in Tielemans. Arsenal can still return to that deal. They've already agreed terms. They've put a year's worth of work into it. Manchester United under Ten Hag haven't yet made any kind of serious move. But what's interesting is that Ralf Rangnick really liked Tielemans. So it would kind of be ironic that Rangnick leaves and then Ten Hag goes for a Rangnick target. But I think in a straight choice between Man United and Arsenal, Tielemans is picking Arsenal all day long, not out of any disrespect to Manchester United, but just because his dream was to play for Arsenal before he signed for Leicester. And he went to Monaco when Arsenal nearly signed him because he was worried about playing first team football at Arsenal. But it was always a football club in the back of his mind. So it's not really about Man U versus Arsenal with Tielemans. It's the fact that if he goes anywhere in the Premier League and Arsenal's offer still stands, he's picking Arsenal because he's just got a sort of soft spot for that football club. And then from Leicester's point of view, the other player that we are in the race for is Christian Eriksen. So just to come back to the Eriksen question from before, Leicester are interested, no formal offer at this stage. And I think Eriksen's partially delaying simply because of the volume of Premier League football clubs that are still circling. It's being billed as a straight choice between Brentford and Manchester United. And that is true to some degree. Those are the two formal contract offers. And Thomas Frank will definitely be the first person to know Eriksen's decision. And Manchester United remain confident. There's no truth that Eriksen has rejected Manchester United, but he's waiting to see both what materialises in the market from Manchester United, perhaps only over the next 7 to 10 days, but also if any other clubs come into the mix. So later into the mix for Eriksen, Leicester, Leeds, Everton. So if Raphinha goes, could Leeds somehow land Eriksen? There's a range of different considerations. And I think what's delaying it is that in a perfect world, Tottenham would have been interested and he'd have stayed in London and he'd have gone back there and that would have been job done. But Tottenham are not interested. Tottenham never tabled any kind of formal offer. That's my understanding. I know there's others and credible others that have reported the exact opposite. But my understanding, as I've said for a few weeks now, is that Tottenham were never in the market for Eriksen. So it's a simple situation now where he either plays under Ten Hag, which is the ambitious move and the lucrative one. He stays loyal to Brentford, or potentially picks another one of the newer clubs that are in the mix for him because he just thinks it's the right fit. And I genuinely believe at this stage he's undecided. It's probably accurate to say still Manchester United and Brentford are the two front runners just because of the lack of other formal bids from some of the clubs that I've mentioned. And I do think that we'll get a bit more clarity on this in the next kind of week or so. But one thing is really clear, that contrary to Eriksen's initial hunch of making a decision by day one of pre-season, he's now going to take his time.
Well, as you say, if there's more clubs coming in for him, it needs to be sensible. And I think with Man United, look, I think the terms will probably be agreeable. I think sometimes, again, it's interpretation. When I think of terms, I sort of think, with 150 grand a week, you know, this squad number, this status in the team, these bonuses, would that be acceptable? Yes. That doesn't necessarily mean you've agreed to join, if you get where I'm coming from. So I think Man United's terms are going to be fine. I still think he wants to make that decision based on family. Where does he want to stay? They've obviously had a very big upheaval. There is the Brentford element because they gave him that chance and that opportunity. I think from a Man United point of view, though, to lose, and I mean this with all due respect to the other clubs linked to him, to lose out a free transfer of Eriksen to one of those clubs, it will be a damning statement which fans just don't want to go through. And I think they just want to feel that, you know what, we can't sign a player over Brentford, you know, especially, you know, Newcastle, yes, they're on the way up, but Eriksen's probably not going to see the upside of Newcastle's investment, if that makes sense. So it would be a bitter one and a painful one for United fans to take.
But Terry, the thing is with Manchester United, that fans are still looking at every target based upon the club's history, based upon the potential under Ten Hag. There's nothing wrong with that. You'd expect that from a football fan. But Manchester United, in a foundational sense, in a strategic sense, in a financial sense, in a dressing room sense, are at rock bottom. They've got no Champions League. They've got no unity. They've got a brand new manager, which is hugely exciting, but we don't know what he's going to do. And the whole point was that Ralf Rangnick was supposed to come in and build stepping stones for whoever came in, whether at the time it was a Pochettino or a Ten Hag or a Zinedine Zidane. Ten Hag is now in, and it turns out that Ralf Rangnick's gone. Manchester United don't have the same budget as their rivals. And then a player like Eriksen's coming in, and you have to sell his position in the team, especially at his age when he's relocating with his family from a place like London, having really enjoyed being so focal and in red hot form at Brentford. And then he walks into a team and he needs to understand, what formation is Erik ten Hag going to play? What's the relationship going to be like with CR7? Who else are Manchester United going to bring in? What role does Anthony Martial have at the club? And I don't mean to sound like I'm getting on my high horse and slagging off Manchester United. I grew up watching Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson. Brilliant club, wonderful history. But take that history and rip it up and throw it out of the window, because if you're you give a damn about treble in 1999, what you care about is, at this football club, am I going to enjoy coming in day on day? Am I going to have a direct relationship with the manager? What's it going to be like being in a dressing room with Cristiano Ronaldo? Where do I fit in the team? How often am I going to play? And yeah, of course, what am I going to get paid? And in considering that, he may decide that Manchester United is the wrong club for him. And this is the problem, that the reputation of Manchester United historically doesn't get you a footballer when the other rivals in this day and age in the Premier League have all got good training centres. Most of them are in really decent cities to live in and can still pay you that 100 to 150,000 a week. So Manchester United need to pitch to players now, and perhaps they didn't under Sir Alex Ferguson. And I think the fan base needs to just accept the cold, hard reality, which is Christian Eriksen is not going to relocate from London to Manchester United with no Champions League football solely for the money or the history. He's going to relocate to Manchester United because Ten Hag sells him his role in the team and the dressing room, and the fact that it's still a great club with a great fan base and a great stadium. But if United continue just to cling to the history of what they used to be in trying to get players, they'll keep losing out to a Brentford.
But I feel like listen, I get a lot of what you're saying there, and I think history is important, but no one signs for Man United because what they used to do. It's got to be about the future. And again, a lot of the reports that have suggested and stated that how De Jong's been convinced, and I know that as you've already alluded to, you know, you've been told different things, but a lot of it's been around how they're going to build, how they're going to play, what they need these individuals for, what Ten Hag's going to try and achieve. And I think that's all well and good. There's still the one issue I have is every manager has been promised, every manager that's joined since Fergie has been promised the opportunity to build something. And none of them have been allowed to get to the end of that process for one reason or another, whether they've not been good enough, whether there's been player issues and vice versa. So I totally get the skepticism. But equally for United fans, sometimes it's that saying that out loud that can be an issue for them, as it were. I'm pretty confident on both De Jong and Eriksen, if I'm being honest. I think United will be able to pull them off, but then it's about delivering. That's just my personal feeling. I think we will, but we'll see. If we don't, I'm absolutely in the mud, and we'll see. You mentioned Ronaldo. There was talk about him leaving. I mean, that's not going to happen, I would assume, or have you heard different?
No, Ronaldo will stay at Manchester United, and that, again, may factor the Eriksen decision. The situation with Cristiano is that Manchester United have a not-for-sale stance to anyone, especially not a Premier League rival right now. It's natural that Mendes will be putting out feelers, and that's done firstly to sort of scare Manchester United almost, that he might walk away or at least express his desire to leave. And we know he's frustrated with the transfer activity so far. But I also think that's a little bit unfair because Ten Hag's only just come in. So once again, judging Manchester United based on Rangnick or any previous window, you've got to give Ten Hag a chance. And I think that Ten Hag and Ronaldo will enjoy a strong working relationship. So Mendes did meet Todd Boehly, the Chelsea minority owner and chairman, but they discussed a range of different things, and Ronaldo's future was one of them. And putting that out there to the media can be a tactic from the agent because it sends a message to Manchester United. Manchester United were furious by any reports, though, that Ronaldo would leave, and they are in control of the contract at this stage. So Ronaldo isn't going anywhere, but it's obvious that Mendes is working to determine Ronaldo's next move. And I think, again, this is a lack of understanding from some people about how transfers work, that on day one that you sign a player, the club is often then tasked with drawing up a list of future replacements. So when Manchester City bring in Erling Haaland, one of the first things their scouts will do is draw up a list of players to target for 2, 3, 4, 5 windows ahead that they can monitor and bring in. Because to get those big stars, that's often how long the deals take. So in the case of Ronaldo, Mendes is working on his next move. He perhaps doesn't know exactly when it's going to be, but if Ronaldo wants to keep playing until he's close to 40, it won't be at Manchester United until that age. So when he's, let's say, 38 or 39, he will go somewhere else, whether it's MLS or Qatar. I'm just plucking names, not any specific knowledge of what geographical regions being discussed.
And an agent's job is to do the best by their client. And I think that's something that fans have to understand. Like, putting the feelers out is a sensible thing to do. Because if we end the transfer window and we've signed the equivalent of Lee Catmull, then I can understand a Ronaldo wanting to go and play elsewhere. Are none of the Premier League clubs showing any interest in Tolisso? I feel he could be a good option for Man United, Arsenal and Spurs. I mean, I don't know about you. I've not seen any links to Tolisso. I might have seen one loose one on Twitter, but I don't remember who did it. Was the money in the UK government hushed up? I don't know, though. It's just to do with Chelsea's debt or something. I don't know. I don't quite know what Gavin's alluded to. Hush money.
Well, I mean, I can talk to you about different kinds of money that I'm aware of. So in the case of Chelsea, if that's what the question's about, the final price of 4.25 billion that the club was bought for from Clearlake Bowley had a slight deduction in the final stages of around about 100 million. And that was to offset future what's thought to be tax liability from the Roman Abramovich era. And that's kind of perfectly natural, because normally when you buy a football club, you would have a long period of due diligence. And in that period of due diligence, you would determine the actual bottom lines financially. And if it turns out your offer is then deemed from the buying party to be too high, you could ask for a slight reduction because you've actually been through the books. Clearlake Bowley didn't have the opportunity to go through Chelsea's books. So when the old regime flagged there may be a future tax liability, potentially to a maximum of 100 million, it got deducted from the sale price or withheld in case they have to pay that. And the only relevance to that is not that it's anything hidden or untoward. It's just that if they have to pay it, it goes on the books and therefore has to be factored into financial fair play. The question could also have been about Everton and whether they're in breach of financial fair play. And the short answer there is the COVID-adjusted numbers make it very difficult to pin down Everton's actual financials. So Everton say that they're within the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules, but they have much, much higher costs during COVID that under the new, more relaxed rules, they've been able to offset, which is a red flag because you'd expect most Premier League clubs of their stature to have relatively similar numbers. But Everton are writing off an extra 230 odd million of debt. And most other Premier League clubs' COVID losses are more like 70 odd million or projected to be anyway. So it is a little bit strange, and the Premier League needs to determine where they stand on that. But those are the sort of main two financial things within the Premier League that I'm aware of. But feel free to put in the chat anything a bit more specific. And if I know what you're talking about, I'll provide an answer.
Sometimes the comments were a little vague. You think, well, what quite are you alluding to? I know there's another player you wanted to mention before we end the stream. It was Lewandowski. And of course, he wants Barca. Barca seemingly want him. I did read a report that Bayern want quite a lot of money for him, even though he said he's leaving. What's the latest with Lewandowski, and could his deal to Barca potentially fall through, or do you think it will happen?
I think it will happen, and that's why I also think Barcelona need to try and get De Jong out the door. And once again, even though there may well be some legs still on this Raphinha to Barcelona story, I've said many times he has not decided his next club yet, despite the fact that Chelsea are in the driving seat. If they get the money from De Jong, then they sign Lewandowski first. So that still means they don't have enough instant capital to agree a deal with Leeds United, because it's going to be 60 plus million with Leeds for Raphinha if you include the add-ons as well, a base fee of roughly 55 and then add-ons of probably 5 to 7 million. And Barcelona at the moment cannot get both players, especially if they want to pay the wages for an Alonso, an Azpilicueta, the 55 odd million for Jules Koundé. There's a queue of players waiting to join Barcelona. They're going to have to prioritize. But Lewandowski is the number one choice. He has said he wants to move to Barcelona and no other club. Chelsea, remember, were vaguely interested as well. They've had 2 bids rejected so far, and it looks like Barcelona are going to have to pay in excess of 45 million euros for Lewandowski, and there's probably still going to be some add-ons on top. I think they'll get the deal done because it's becoming a little bit acrimonious now between Bayern Munich and Lewandowski. He'll have to just return to pre-season training and get on with business as usual. But the last thing that Barcelona will want is for seasons to begin, Champions League draws to be made, and Lewandowski still not to be completed. So I think as soon as Barcelona get kind of capital in hand, the first thing they'll do is put another formal bid down for Lewandowski and get that deal over the line. I think if you were putting a percentage on it, the Lewandowski to Barcelona deal by the end of the window is still at 85 or 90% likely, unless somehow Barcelona simply cannot find the funds. But they always seem to find a way, don't they?
They always seem to. And there's a tweet that's just come out, just slightly relating to Barca and Raphinha, from Fabrizio, who has said that Chelsea are awaiting for Raphinha's answer. Been told Dzeko has direct talks with Chelsea scheduled tomorrow. Not too sure what that's about. Maybe he's got a different player that's in line with them. Talk still on after agreement with Leeds. Barca and Arsenal will try again in the end. I mean, pretty much just what Ben's explained to us live on the air. A few people are tweeting saying, what about Fabrizio's up there? I'm like, it's pretty much what Ben alluded to in bullet points. But yeah.
The Deco thing with Chelsea is about Raphinha, because Deco is obviously representing Raphinha.
Oh, sorry, I've got that. Yeah, that's absolutely it. Sorry, my brain got a bit mixed up there. That's why I would speak to Chelsea. Yeah, sorry.
Again, just to reiterate, if you're late to the feed, the position, as I said last night, the Leeds United Chelsea agreement has come before the player agreement. And once again, as reported last night to a fair amount of criticism, Raphinha has not decided his next club. So Chelsea's tactic is to get this done within 48 hours. And they've put a 5-year contract offer on the table, and they are waiting to see whether or not Raphinha accepts that. But the negotiation of personal terms is not a formality by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to require Todd Boehly to pull out all of his negotiation skills. And if it's done quickly, there's only one winner, and that's Chelsea Football Club. And as we speak now, it is still highly likely Raphinha goes to Chelsea. But if Barcelona find the funds and drag it out, and Raphinha is prepared to wait, and then 2 offers get put on the table, and Barcelona still have to agree a deal with Leeds United, remember, then it has always been intimated that Raphinha's preference is to join Barcelona. So Chelsea's challenge is to get personal terms. Barcelona have already got personal terms verbally with Raphinha. So they don't have to convince the player. They have to convince Leeds United and find the money to do that. So the 2 clubs are in different positions. Yeah. Chelsea have got the club agreement, but not the personal agreement. If they get it in 48 hours, it's a done deal. If they don't get it in 48 hours, then Raphinha perhaps is prepared to wait for Barcelona, who he's already agreed personal terms with, but they are miles off any agreement at the moment with Leeds United, because even if they put down an offer of 60 odd million, they know what they've got to bid to get Raphinha as far as Leeds are concerned, but they do not have the money to do it. So it's not a case of, oh, let's negotiate, oh, let's try and get a cheaper amount. Leeds are not going to sell now for cheaper than 60 million because they've agreed that
deal with 60 million with Chelsea. Yeah, no, it makes absolute sense. It does. Ben, absolute pleasure as always speaking on the Done Deal Show. Viewers, super chatters, members, thank you so much. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the Terrace before you go away today. Until next time, everybody, take care of yourselves. Goodbye. God bless.